Hi, Paul James again. This video is about IrriGRAY zones. As with standard irrigation systems, a zone, sometimes called a station, is an irrigation area with an electric solenoid valve that turns on water when the valve is turned on by the controller. Because IrriGRAY uses a flow meter or water meter to accurately measure the amount of water irrigated and knows from the climate and water settings how much water is required, you only need to specify the size of your zone, how densely planted the zone is, and what the average plant coefficient value is. IrriGRAY does the math for you automatically. You do not need to calculate or work out the number of minutes required. Now, IrriGRAY has 4 zone types: regular subsurface graywater drip zones, excess graywater disposal zones, potable water sprinkler zones, and potable water drip zones. With these 4 zone types, IrriGRAY provides all the solutions you will need within the one system. It's very important that your IrriGRAY graywater zones have the correct amount of drip line installed, so the irrigation flow rate is similar to the rate of grey water coming out of your home. Otherwise, IrriGRAY would need a large surge tank, which would not only increase the system purchase price and installation cost, but would also create odour issues. Before designing your own zones, please read the irrigation section of the IrriGRAY installation guide. If you don't yet have a copy of the guide, you can download it from waterrenew.com. And let's do that now. Now that we're at waterrenew.com, we can click on Documents and then choose the first in the list, which is IrriGRAY Client and Installation Guide. This is a comprehensive guide. It's about 35 pages long, but it is broken into easy-to-read sections. Let's have a quick look now. The first 2 pages are an introduction. Then it covers monitoring, which is the subject of another video. Then we have coverage of grey water. How far can grey water go to irrigate your landscape? Grey water do's and don'ts. A system schematic so you can easily see how the components fit together. Plumbing instructions. And then an overview of the IrriGRAY Twist to Clean filter option, and also the WaterRenew disc filter option. And both of these filter options are fully automated and self-cleaning. A short section on electrical and how to connect additional sensors and meters if required. Then pages 14 to page 20 is very important for this particular video. This contains all of the irrigation instructions. What are the mandatory components? In greater detail than I discussed before, what are the zone types? How to design a zone distribution to be as efficient as possible. How much drip line is required when irrigating a landscape bed? How to install the landscape beds correctly. How big should a lawn zone be? How to install lawn zones. A section on new planting, so if your landscape is completely new, the soil is probably dry, so it needs extra water. This is also covered in a different video. An introduction to programming IrriGRAY. How to view charts within IrriGRAY so you can see when, where, and how much water was used to irrigate your zones. How to connect the IrriGRAY tablet to your Wi-Fi network. Checking your system at startup after installation. How to remotely control your system from anywhere in the world. For those that want to, how to look at the recorded data in depth. And an example of an advanced graywater, rainwater, and potable water irrigation design. But let's get back to the irrigation zones page in irrigray.com. Again, as a reminder, there is always information on the right-hand side of the page listed as Help Desk. But in this example, we have 8 zones have been established, and Zone 7 is turned off. I'd like to scroll down to the bottom and show you that Zone 16 can't be accessed. The IrriGRAY system has already defined that Zone 16 in this case must be used as a master solenoid controller, because one of your other zones uses potable water only. This is actually coming from Zones 7 and Zone 8. Prior to that, all of our zones were graywater drip-a-line. These zones are using potable water drip-a-line. According to code, and to make sure there aren't any unnecessary sources of leaking water in an irrigation system, you must have a master valve as well as your zone valve. And you might ask, well, why don't we need a master valve for graywater drip-a-line? IrriGRAY already has a master valve for graywater zones. If we look at the automatic twist-to-clean filter assembly, the master valve is already in place here. Whenever makeup water is required, in other words, there wasn't enough grey water during the day, this valve is opened and the controller determines which zones it goes through based on water requirements and how much is being irrigated through the meter. Instead, if you had the disc filter, its master valve is here. However, if we've got a combined system that has grey waters only zones and also has potable water only zones, then we do need an extra master valve. Looking again at the last page of the installation guide and manual, I've broken this into 3 different areas. The blue circle is our source of alternative water. It could just be potable water, or it could be rainwater backed up by potable water. It really doesn't matter in this case. My grey circle defines my IrriGRAY system and grey water zones. Now what's happening is that I'll draw a line here. In this region here, the potable or alternative water supply is being split up into 2 different directions. One to the grey water system, which already has the master valve here, and split across into our potable water only irrigation zones. Now in this case, we would need a master valve put in either before the meter or after the meter. It certainly needs to be put before any of the zone valves. It needs to be put after the split between the potable water only zones and the IrriGRAY grey water assembly. So let's go back to how we define our zones, and we will edit Zone 1. You can put in any zone name that you like, but we do recommend that you leave the zone number at the front. This helps understand which zone is which when looking at charts. This is a grey water drip-a-line zone, and we start off with the surface area. So here it is 900 square feet. We choose the plant coefficient. This is particularly interesting for lawn. Plant coefficients are designed such that you get the maximum crop growth for that plant. That's fantastic if you want lots of flowers. That's not so great if you're trying to save water and you only want to cut your lawn once every week or even perhaps every 2 weeks. If you use 0.6, which is the recommended plant coefficient for a warm climate turf grass, you'll be out there cutting your lawn twice a week and wasting water. So instead, you can normally bring that down to 0.4. It saves about 1/3 of the water and you don't have to cut the grass as much. Plant density is pretty straightforward. If you've got lawn, it's 100% dense. However, if you had a landscape bed, it might only be covered 20% of its area by planting, in which case this number would come down by a significant amount, basically down to 20%. Beware of beds which have trees. You need to include the size of the foliage extent in your calculations of the surface area and plant density. Increase-decrease is very useful in bumping up or bumping down the amount of water required every day. Now, some plants do not like grey water every day. Most do. Most thrive on having a constant source of moisture in the soil. But grapevines, avocado and cacti really don't like it. So we can turn off water completely. What's a good distribution? Probably there, there and there. So now this zone would only get water twice a week. The information down here under line length is not used to calculate how much water is going to be delivered to the zone. This is to help IrriGRAY determine if there is a problem with the zone in the future. If IrriGRAY knows that you've got 1,000 feet of 0.6 gallon per hour drip line, it should flow between 5 gallons to 10 gallons per minute. But let's say that all of a sudden it is running at 20 gallons a minute. That would mean there's a break in the line somewhere. Or perhaps it's only running 2 to 3 gallons per minute. That would mean that there has been pressure loss in the pump, possibly a blockage in a distribution line, or an issue with the solenoid valve. So it makes sense to put in the correct value for the dripper line length and which dripper line is being used, so that IrriGRAY can monitor that for you. Freeze capable means that the zone can handle irrigation once temperature drops below freezing. Now, this impact varies significantly depending on your climate. If you're in a marginal freezing zone, irrigating during a freeze can actually be beneficial. Even though the grass under a lawn does not need irrigation water in very cold weather, by pumping water around in the morning in the root zone, it can actually stop the roots suffering so much from freezing conditions. However, you wouldn't want to do this if you're in a region where you get a 2-week hard freeze. Adding extra water to the soil doesn't help the roots in that circumstance. So let's look at the next zone type, grey water disposal. Now, we're not trying to grow a crop here or grow plants, trees, shrubs or flowers. All we're trying to do is get rid of the grey water, so we could create an extra zone or two such that in winter, instead of putting water to a septic, which costs money to maintain, the grey water can go to a disposal zone. Now, the reason we have information down the bottom, again, is to help IrriGRAY determine if there's an issue with that drip line. So try and get that information correct. Potable water sprinkler zones are used where drip would be impractical, whether it's because it's a very large property, or perhaps it's a retrofit situation where the grey water is going to be reserved for trees, shrubs and landscape beds, and the existing spray system would be used for lawns. IrriGRAY does try to optimize spray irrigation as much as possible, and it does this via the cycle soak method. So instead of putting 30 minutes of water out in a day, which results in runoff and also evaporation loss, instead IrriGRAY starts at a selectable time, normally 4 o'clock, and will only put out a maximum of 5 minutes of water per hour, up until the correct number of gallons have been delivered to that zone for the day. Now, there are some built-in restrictions here. It will not put out water via sprinklers between 10 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night, and that is to avoid evaporation issues. And also, if it's a freezing condition, it will not do spray irrigation until temperature has reached your stop freezing setting, and that's set up in the climate and water page. Potable water dripline zones are primarily established for vegetable gardens. This is because some vegetables certainly would prefer having water 3 times a day in very hot climates. IrriGRAY allows you to set 3 different start times or programs for the day, and you can decide what percentage of the daily water budget is irrigated for each of those start times. The next video in this series covers vacation supply and new planting. See you then.